All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with attendance.
Chair Eagleson Cheslowich,
Present.
Vice Chair Roman.
Present.
Can you also state if there's anyone 18 or older in the room with you?
There's not.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Pease? Board Member Willis? Board Member Wimmer?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Are there any agenda changes?
No agenda changes.
Okay. And is there any public comment on items not on the agenda?
There's 3 on Zoom, but no raised hands.
Okay. Then let's just go into the schedule and staff report.
So good morning. This is Amy French, Chief Planning Official, and have been the Historic Resources Board liaison for a few years. And I'm going to today be turning it over to Steven Schweitzer to be the liaison for the board.
Let's see. Good morning. Bear with me while I get our presentation open for today.
I guess we should just announce this is a Historic Resources Board retreat, which seems like a regular meeting because we're in the same location, but members of the public are welcome to participate.
And with that, let's go through just what's on the slide here. So meeting schedule, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more meetings left of the year. This is the August 8th meeting. With our new ordinance changes, the quorum is 3 members. Council did conduct some interviews on August 5th, and appointments are scheduled for August 12th. 2 existing members whose terms have expired are invited to attend and make 5 members today. Following in September 12th, that would be the first new meeting where appointed members could be introduced unless a special meeting is arranged. And following that, per our bylaws, October 10th would be the election of the new chair and vice chair. And going into some city official reports, just an update on August 19th at the city council meeting. There's a consent calendar item to kind of close the chapter on the 2023 recognizance survey, which will add 5 more properties to the inventory. So those are listed on the screen, varying from category 1 to category 2. And as an update, in the background, staff has been doing some website maintenance and updates to the historical resource board page, as well as the historic preservation pages on the website. So those include some code references that have been updated, uploading the revised HRB bylaws document, and there's some process documents that we are in the process of updating, and of course, adding new contact information for the historical preservation planner. And that concludes the city official reports. And with that, we can move on to the next agenda item.
All right, so the next agenda item is the draft Mills Act letter and some other content around the Mills Act proposal. So is there any public comment on this particular item?
No raised hands.
Okay. So then I'd like to do the staff report on this.
Sure, if I may, through the chair. So as noted, this is finalizing perhaps the draft Mills Act letter, and with the intent to send to City Council, this would satisfy the previous fiscal year work plan goal number 5. And there is also an attachment with this item from Board Member Pease for regarding the Tailored Mills Act program document. So that was distributed for your guys' consumption and review. And we can entertain any further questions that the board may have.
Okay, yeah, I think we should just open this up to some questions and comments from the board.
Well, I'm wondering what, so this Mills Act document hasn't been updated from our last comments. And I'm wondering what kind of process we want to, not the letter, but the Mills Act document itself. How do we, what would be our best process to get that revised and in a state where we want to take it to council?
If I'm hearing correctly, that would be the pilot program document that you're referring to. If my memory serves me correctly, that was last updated in 2018. There are some red lines in that document that haven't been officialized, if you will. There was some pretty good discussion comments provided by board member Peace regarding about some applicable revisions to that document. As for devoting some staff time to that, I might defer to our chief planning official to discuss some of those further steps of how we can get a more polished document ready for council.
Well, technically it doesn't actually need to be staff time, right? That the HRB we could rewrite it in a subcommittee and get approval from the rest of the board, bring it to the board.
Should that be a task that the board would like to take on that could be pursued?
I'm not going to speak for the board on that one. I think it would probably be a back and forth with, but I think if we cannot get staff time in the near future, I think it would behoove us to move this forward. Because, I mean, basically we're looking at the same document we looked at a month ago. And I find it hard to I think it would be easier if we had something to build on.
If I may, through the chair, just a follow-up question on that. So board member Willis, are you thinking that with holding off perhaps on sending this draft letter until a more finalized, pilot program is prepared, or I'm just thinking of order of operations here. So.
Well, I would hope that, yeah, I mean, it seems kind of, I mean, I guess I don't really have a vision. If we sent the letter now, are you saying with this pilot program attached as is, or just no pilot program proposal? And then sit down with council and get some more specifics before we actually, I don't know, at the same time as perfecting our pilot program document?
I think that was the intention, was that we would send it as it is. At least that was my understanding. As a working document that is open to revision from council, so that they could see the red lines that we have in there. I have marked it up with a bunch of notes and questions that I'm happy to talk through now, or talk through with the subcommittee, or if if staff time is going to be allotted to this, or it can just be held until we actually meet with council, because I'm sure they will have lots of questions and suggestions as well. That was my understanding.
Thank you for that. And then if I just want to add on to that, the city council may, and as with any jurisdiction with the Mills Act, provide a more tailored program as the name suggests. So should any modifications to what's already the state minimum requirements for entering, say, a contract, those could be implemented but at the local level. So it depending on, the appetite for the board, it could be, as what's been suggested by the vice chair, Rowan, for sending the document as is. There could be some staff time devoted in coordination with the board for a more polished document if need be.
I would plead for a more polished document. I think this is just a little too, I guess, rough. And has this gone to the city attorney yet? Because I don't know if I'm the only one, but I'm really bothered by whether that we're looking at as a 5-year term or a 10-year term. I mean, it seems like if Mills Act says a 10-year term, but we're changing the agreement 5 years in, I want to know that flies legally before I take it to council. And I don't want to get bogged down in discussions with or back and forth with council with things we already know should be changed.
I think one thing here I've also been thinking about is just, kind of efficient allocation of time. I think the benefit of sending a letter sooner rather than later is to get a sense of how council's feeling about this issue in general. If this is something they're really, completely uninterested in pursuing, I think it would be important to know that up front before we invest, our resources or staff resources in altering a document that, doesn't really have anywhere to go.
It's going. It needs to go. And I think we at least have 2 council members, 3, I think I'd say 3, that are very much on board. And I cannot tell you where the others land. But during my interview, I think it was very clear that there were at least 3 council members that supported this rather strongly. So I think they are looking for us to get this done. I know there has not been the official directive on this, but I think we all the board, I think the board is interested in preservation. And, even if we have the most watered down Mills Act in the universe, I think we're better off than we are now. So I don't think we need to hesitate because council might not be on board. I think we need to make our strongest case so that all of council is on board.
That's valuable. I think my concern becomes what is a realistic timeline to get this document revised so that we can move forward with sending this to council.
I agree. I think we ought to submit. I'm sorry, Amy.
Earlier, Stephen had noted that I might weigh in on this. So, one of the things that occurred was our council rep to this board had noted a study session would be desirable from her standpoint. Whether the others think so or not, I don't know. But an approach that we can take is that we're advocating for a study session, and in that report that would accompany the letter and the Mills Act draft with or without the red lines would be to say, we've done this amount of work and we're interested in getting feedback, and there's some pros and cons to this approach that's been identified. I think that the council expects to have some analysis by staff. So that would be, so it's coming from the board, but staff does need to weigh in a staff report that would support the study session. So, the timing on that, I don't know, but that would be a normal practice.
I think we ought to send the letter.
I mean, I agree too, because I was on the subcommittee for this back in 2017, 2018. I think it was, we spent a lot of time on it and did some, evening meetings and reviews. And we spent a lot of time on it, and we got it to a point where we felt like it was very up to date and comprehensive. And I think it's time to share it with the council and get their feedback, because, the more and more we perfect it, the more time is going to pass by. We're possibly going to gain new board members, and then they might have opinions. And I just think we've gotten it to a point where it's presentable. Of course, that there's some areas that need to be further refined and looked at, but I think council's going to give us some feedback that's going to require us to go reevaluate it anyway. So, I think we need to get it in front of the council as soon as we can.
I'll just say one more thing, and that is, when staff does prepare staff reports to council, there's a lot of eyes on that, including the city attorneys. So to answer your question, does our city attorney, they haven't looked at it to date, but that is something that comes from the board, and then our city attorney will review the report as to presentation of that document.
So can we at least get a current date on the tailored program outline? So can we revise it enough that we at least feel confident dating it 2024?
That could be done.
Or it could just be listed as presented, 2024 or something.
Yes.
I mean, there's documentation that this board has seen it multiple times and, has had the opportunity to amend it. And they haven't, right? There's been multiple opportunities there. So I think I'm
So maybe
hearing
we
that
just
it's,
need it revised,
Sorry?
revised. Maybe we just need, when it says January 2018, maybe we just need a date that says revised in July of 2024.
but I don't think it has been revised.
Well, I want it revised before council sees it, at least to a modium. So don't you think that if the city attorney says that we need a 10-year contract, that we're not going to modify this? If the city attorney has feedback, we're not going to modify this draft? We're just going to make a subset note, letter, whatever, notes to council?
So I'll just say it again, the staff reports that staff prepares, bringing forward any study by anybody, our consultants or a board, would comment on the report, on whatever document that is going forward, and would be, have a critique of what's proposed. We can certainly alert the board that what the attorney says, but about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we can send the letter and then this document is still open to modification at a variety of points along the process.
Because a study session is just that. It's not an action.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional comments or questions about the letter specifically?
I just want to move that we vote on it.
Okay.
Send it.
Yeah. I want to also just thank Board Member Roman in particular for her work on drafting the letter and pulling that together. So thank you. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
So would you like to, was that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
Okay, I will second.
I want to clarify, does that mean approve and send along with this draft Mills Act thing?
I think the draft goes with it, right? Staff?
Yes, that would be correct.
Prior to a staff report or in conjunction with a staff report?
So it would be an attachment to the letter.
Do we want to vote?
Well, okay. Can we make a few minor adjustments here? It bothers me that it says city tax collector. Can we just, on page 6 of the report, can we just change that to the Santa Clara County tax collector? Can we just do a few minor modifications to the draft report so we don't sound stupid?
If I may, through the chair,
Yeah.
the letter does reference that, they're at the direction of city council that further revisions could be implemented on this program. And just to note, if the city is going to pursue a Mills Act contract and program, we would have to meet the minimum requirements as required by the state. And we can implement at the local level further requirements and restrictions, such as what's noted in the pilot program, say tax limitations on property values and say any reduction of loss of revenue, potential revenue, should I say, that the city might experience of entering these contracts. So all of that would be further addressed with, say, the study session that has been toyed with. So
Great, thank you.
Perfectionism is killing time.
I mean, I have a feeling once, this gets to the next phase, every word is going to be studied and scrutinized. It's going to be completely rewritten, possibly. I mean, I don't feel like any of your efforts are going to go lost. Just keep them in mind, keep notes of what things concern you, and there's going to be opportunities upon opportunities to
I
address
totally agree
those.
with you.
Yeah.
I just would like to see it developing. I don't want to see it, it pains me to see it stagnant since 2018.
I think we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah,
that's
we
been, seconded. Can we vote on it?
Yes, please.
Chair Eagleson Cheslowich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roman,
Yes.
Board Member Pease,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
Board Member Wimmer,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
All right. Um, So I know that there's going to be a lot of further discussion on the Mills Act, but is there anything else that there's a desire to address today? Or is everyone comfortable moving on at this point to discussion of the bulletin? Bulletin. Okay, let's move on to the bulletin. So let's start with staff report. I think I called for public comment first last time, but is there public comment? I guess we'll do that.
There I have no raised hands or speaker cards.
Okay, sounds good. All right. For the staff report.
Of course. Let's see here. So as noted at the prior meeting, staff has been conducting some updates to the historic review bulletin that previously was approved back in 2023. These include just some minor text changes for some shorter and more succinct sentences, changing the orientation of the table on the rear or the second page of the bulletin, and modifying and removing the potentially eligible references. So this was distributed in all of the packets for your review. And if there's any comments or suggestions, staff would welcome that discussion.
Stephen, so when we're talking about Group B, sorry, never mind. I lost my place already. No. Previously, no. Okay, so below that, when does a property require evaluation? So a property that's not yet been evaluated or designated may qualify. So does that mean, is that referring to the list that's kind of out there in the 500, or is that referring to every property in Palo Alto?
So pursuant, excuse myself, to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, there is for discretionary projects, any structure that may be 45 years of age or older could be considered a historic resource. So that is discussed in that third section on that first page of that bulletin, denoting that and referencing should any discretionary projects be involved, it may require further historical resource evaluation to determine the status of, say, structure or the site.
Any other comments? I thank you for your work on this. Okay.
And if I may, through the chair, if it's with the blessing of the board, we can upload this to the website. So
Would we need to take a vote to authorize that, or is it good enough to just indicate support?
I mean, I'm trying to remember in the past, and it's way in the past, although we did discuss this back in October at some meeting. But I don't think there was a vote in October to update it. Possibly the first time it was shown to the board, there was a vote to approve it.
All right. Well, does anybody have any reservations, or I think this looks great? Okay. All right. Thank you. I think the next item on the agenda is preservation awards and discussing that possibility. So do we have public comment on that?
I have a raised hand from Darlene. I'm not sure if it was for the end of the bulletin or for the preservation award.
Okay, we can open it up either way.
Okay.
Hi, this is Darlene. I had a question on the evaluation as a historic resource. It says the city of Palo Alto may require an HRE report as long as both of the following conditions apply. And I guess as a resident, an obvious question is what criteria would determine whether it may be required or not?
Would you like to?
Thank you for that question. So as for criteria, that would constitute a discretionary development application. That would, in summary, include, say, two-story development, any commercial development, things that would require architectural review, say a variance, items that require, say, under the California Environmental Quality Act, a discretionary application. Any items such as ministerial permits, such as, say, building permits or business license or things of that nature that are ministerially approved would not be subject to this requirement. And there is that second qualifier here of the existing development is more than 45 years of age. So that is a state requirement. And as noted in the staff report, that public resource code section provides that language that's provided at the state level. So just adherence to those state requirements. So those two qualifiers of discretionary application in play and whether the structure is more than 45 years of age.
I think just to clarify, it says may require. So if it is required, that would be, if you meet those two conditions, it would be required. When you say may require, it sounds like it, even though you meet those two conditions, you may not need to do it. I just wanted to clarify the language.
Well, the language is used there, and as you pointed out aptly, it is loose. It may rather than will be required. There are certain instances of, say, a structure has sustained multiple renovations, if it has been over 45 years of age, and a full-on, say, historical resource evaluation may not be required because there is evidence in the city records or, say, state records, if you will, that would determine, say, the non-eligible status or the structure would not meet the criteria for designation for a historic resource. So the city would not be requiring, say, a property owner to conduct a resource evaluation on a structure that would not meet the designation for criteria. So that would be that instance that you're referring to. So it really is case-by-case analysis on these.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, now let's move on to the preservation awards. So just confirming there are no public comments on this particular item.
I have no request to speak.
Okay, and so let's move on to the staff report for this.
If I may, through the chair. So our comprehensive plan policy, as noted on the slide, L7.6 provides that the city shall promote award programs and other forms of public recognition for exemplary works of historic preservation projects. So to date, the Historical Resource Board does not have an active preservation award program. Staff had noticed that this policy is in place, and compliance at the comprehensive plan and implementation of that policy could be explored with the board. Just want to note that there are some collaboration efforts, if you will, that are existing in the community with Paha and past, offering their annual historic preservation awards. So it could be, a combination, say in conjunction with these historical societies, or it could be at the, say, direction of the board to have their own award program. There are some existing awards in the community. So those would include historical preservation awards, as well as the centennial plaques that are offered to any structure in the city that reaches 100 years of age. Some items to consider if the board should choose to pursue a preservation award program would be the frequency of the awards, the criteria for selection of any structure to be awarded, and the time and location of the award ceremony. So all of those items could be fleshed out and would ideally be roped into, say, the next fiscal year work plan, the 2024 and 2025. And to solidify the criteria for selection and the frequency and some of those requirements that would likely require a revision to the bylaws as well. So that could, as noted in the staff report, include an article addition to the to the bylaws. And there is another board, the Architecture Review Board, that the city has that has a an award program. And that in many sense, it could be modeled on some of those criteria, which are noted in the staff report. So it's at a frequency of 5 years that awards are determined, and it's for any structures that have, or projects, should I say, that have been approved, been reviewed by the board, and have been constructed. So should the board, the Historical Resource Board, choose to follow in line with that, staff could compile an eligible list of projects that have come before the board on a specified time frame, and we could dwindle down and select, depending on the criteria of selection, what structures or projects that we would like to promote. And I can entertain any further questions.
Okay, thank you. Board comments and discussion?
I mean, I guess I feel like PAHA and PAST, they do an excellent job at, their award. That's a big part of their, I guess, efforts. And I know that we work sort of, we have a liaison with them and we sort of communicate together. I don't know, I kind of feel like if we crafted our own award system, I don't know. I kind of feel like since they have sort of spearheaded that effort in the community, maybe I could see us doing something to strengthen that, and as opposed to coming up with a secondary award system. That's just my gut reaction, just because, any program like that takes a lot of effort and, expense. And I just feel like they are committed to doing such an award program that, can we just bolster that or support it in a unique way that could help further those efforts?
What is the frequency of their awards programs?
PAST does it
Annual, right?
annually.
It's
Yeah.
annual. Right?
And I gotta say, I shared Margaret's original response, but I think I'm sort of coming around that I think we definitely should coordinate with them. But I think adding our own voice to strengthen preservation in the community is important, and I think PAST would support that. I don't think we want to be in conflict with them. I think I'd like to see us do the awards biannually. I think that the Architecture Review Board probably does more commercial stuff, and the 5-year plan is more in scale with that. But I think for preservation, because we really we want to stay, a little immediate. I think maybe especially in the next 10 years, that biannually might work better for us. And I think we need. Okay, the PAST board is getting old, like me, and I think they would appreciate the support, both with awards and plaques, if we wanted to help support the cost of their plaque program, and also with doing tour brochures and any promotional, educational materials in the city. I think that they're a great resource, and I think we should be supportive of them, but I think they would also love to be supportive of us, and I think we should maybe move forward with that hope.
I had just a follow-up question. It sounds like kind of the proposal for what the HRB would do would be, awards that honor projects that actually appeared before us. PAST, their award program is very established and I think very recognized in the community, but also actually covers a broader range of projects because they can give an award to projects that didn't necessarily come before us because it didn't, meet the threshold of what needs to come before us. So we would really be looking at a subset of projects. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, the In short, yes, would be the answer. The board may choose the criteria for selection. So that is, modeled after, say, what was suggested in the staff report for the architectural review board for projects that have come before the board. So
Okay.
that could be explored.
Yeah.
As a city award, this is just qualitatively different. I don't think it competes with anything, and I think it's a good idea.
You do or you don't think it's a good idea, Christian?
You don't?
He does.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think, could you just repeat whether you think it's a good or not good idea?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, through the chair, so this is currently not on our current fiscal year work plan. So it is suggested that this would be placed on the following fiscal year work plan, and that also would track with the award ceremony for the architectural review board, which is coming or up to the 2025 year. So that's when those awards would be awarded. So whether the frequency would be, the same or shortened, truncated, if you will, that could be explored.
It seems to me like looking at this further and working out like the specifics of what a program would look like is certainly worth placing on the work plan, and actually aligning the cycle, I think, makes a lot of sense. I don't know if people have other reactions to that, but
I'm supportive of putting it on the work plan as a future goal to continue exploring. I think it's worth exploring. I also agree that whatever the HRB does should further bolster what PAHA is, the programs that are already in place, because I think those are working well. But that's also something that we can dive into and explore as we look at this more closely.
I was going to ask, what sort of program does the ARB do, and how often do they do it? I mean, maybe we could tandem on to their efforts where it's an ARB/HRB award. And so they've already established a yearly pattern format to craft these awards and present them. Maybe we could just tandem onto that instead of creating our own new program.
So good morning. Happy to introduce myself. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning and the current ARB liaison. The ARB does awards every 5 years. And so we take a look at projects that the ARB has looked at. So to your point, that it may be a smaller subset. And then we also look, have those projects been constructed? And so if they've been constructed, then they're on the list for a potential award. And then the ARB is coming up with different categories for those awards. And there's a ceremony that goes with that. And that's something that potentially the HRB, could be part of that ceremony, whether it's fully integrated or, one right after the other kind of thing.
Well, I think we should, sorry. I think we should.
I think there's a distinction between these two awards. This one should stand alone. If the ceremony's at the same time, that's good and convenient and efficient, but I think it's distinctive.
But I definitely think we should put it on the work plan, which is what we're deciding today. And I would like to see it move forward when it does, hopefully relatively quickly. I think it would be great to have a subcommittee of some past members and some HRB members. And we can, as a board, we can look at what has been done in the past, which kinds of properties they've acknowledged. And we could maybe go back through the last 10 years and see what we would have liked to have acknowledged. Maybe Margaret would volunteer to be around as historic information as she's going off the board. Maybe she would also be on that committee. But I think that we could coordinate an effort relatively quickly if we were familiar with kind of the status quo of, where we are and where we've been. So I definitely support getting it on the work plan, but I'm hoping it could be a relatively quick item on our work plan.
And just to follow up, I always think, starting programs, ideas are great, but to execute them is, more of a task. But now that, we've had this discussion, I kind of agree that having a unique HRB award might be a really valid and worthy thing. We don't necessarily need to have like an awards ceremony. We could certainly recognize these projects even at our morning meeting and just present an award if we can invite the applicant to come and receive the award. But we don't have to have a evening event like some of the Past and Paha, they have like a thing at Lucy Stern where it's a social event. I think that might be a little bit of an undertaking. Maybe we start on a small scale and then build up and then maybe eventually have that kind of a.
Yeah, I mean, I think
an
there's an
event.
opportunity to coexist with past and participate, organize a single award ceremony. Ours would not be annually, but we could certainly coordinate with past. And I think they might be open to doing a joint program with us. Biannually would be my preference, or, every 5 years or whatever we decide.
If this goes into this work plan, there won't be an award ceremony till 2030, if I'm correct. It would be 2030 before we would have our first award, 5-year cycle.
If I may, through the chair, this could be worked on. Staff in the background could pile a list of eligible projects that have come before, say within a time frame of what Board Member Willis had suggested, 10 years or even further back, even say a shorter time frame. That fiscal year does start in July. Or June, should I say. And with that, the award ceremony, it's my understanding that the Architectural Review Board would be awarding their selected projects and in the fall. So staff could work at a fast pace and we could align that
So
in
we
the
could
fall
do
as
it
well.
sooner.
So it could be next year.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, well, I think it would, I
Yeah.
particularly like the idea of a display down in the lobby, something in the local press. I think this would be important now, recognition. So I just think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves about exactly where the award ceremony is going to be and who's going to be in it.
I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of support for putting it on the
Yeah.
work plan and going from there.
And actually, I support Stephen's idea. We could do a test run 2025. We might not perfect it, but I think it would be great. I'd like to see it during Preservation Week, which is also when PAST does there. But it also would highlight Preservation Week on another level. So May, I'd like to see it happen in May.
Do we need to vote to put it on a work plan for, okay, so I'd like to make a motion to place this on the fiscal year, was it fiscal year 25 work plan? How you count it, or is it 26?
So it would be 24, 25.
24, 25. Okay,
yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to place this on the fiscal year 24, 25 HRB work plan.
I'd love to second that.
Chair Eagleson Cheslowik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roman,
Yes.
Board Member Pease,
Yes,
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
Board Member Wimmer,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Okay. All right, so the next item is this year's work plan, this coming year's work plan. So I think this is really just to review it, confirm it, and then acknowledge that it will be presented to council on a future date TBD. So are there any public comments on the HRB work plan?
I have no raised hand.
Okay, and so staff report.
As noted on the slide, so we had previously had a slot with City Council on August 12th. That date has been pushed to a date uncertain. That will be determined at a later date. So just a brief rundown of what that future meeting would look like would be the presentation by the chair of the work plan and getting its approval by City Council. So I just highlighted on the slide here the 4 goals of the current work plan that we're in. And if there's any discussion on those items or potential discussion about what that presentation might look like, staff is happy to entertain any further questions.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? questions? I know we've already looked at this, so.
I'm having a little trouble. Can you rephrase number 3 just so I can clarify it in my head?
So what was provided on the slide is what's bolded on the work plan. So if you refer to attachment E of your packet, project goal 3 would read, conduct a survey of the local inventory resources listed prior to the 2023 Historic Recognizance Survey to determine historic conditions. If council directs a survey update, that would require resources and may extend into the next year work plan. So on that, to further elaborate, that would be a cleanup effort, if you will, of any structures that have either been demolished and looking at any of the category upgrades that have gone before the board as well as council and just cleaning up the existing inventory. And there was discussion listed in the work plan about potentially expanding those efforts with say the allocation of resources, of investigating properties that could be elevated in status or say potentially by a city council directive that would investigate properties that have either conducted renovations that they would now be eligible for, say, a category 3 to be elevated to a category 2 or perhaps a category 1. And on the flip side of that, looking at properties that perhaps have had or sustained renovations that could be demoted or, removed, say, from the inventory due to significant modifications. So it's a little two-pronged situation, if you will, if you would like to think about it. The first effort would be predominantly done by staff of looking at the information that we have in the record of demolition projects and what's already been approved for the category upgrades. And then that second prong would be needing some allocation of resources to further flesh out.
So, yeah, I think what I wanted to know is the inventory means the inventory, the existing inventory, everything that's been, okay, sounds great.
Any other questions, comments? Do we need a vote to have this go at this point? Or I think we already approved it, right? So we're all set?
Correct.
Okay, great. All right. If there are no more comments on that, then we can move on to agenda item 5, the historic status label and the parcel report, and suggested updates to that. Are there public comments on that item?
Yes, I have 2 raised hands.
Okay.
First is Amy Sung.
All right. Mute and speakers will have 3 minutes.
Good morning, HRB board and city liaison. My name is Amy Song. I am a local resident. I have a question about the proposal to address the historic status labeled in parcel report, particularly is the potentially eligible status. And when I look at the report, I am not very clear as to what is the difference of removing the status from the parcel report and then still subject these properties to the internal review. And that is something that I'm just not very clear. And the other one that I am puzzled about is that what is the criteria that will be applied to this? There's a number 5 that says not evaluated, may need evaluation. So if I could get some information, understanding what the difference of the current status and the proposed solution, and more importantly, really wanted to get my arms around like how many properties will be impacted by this change. And that's, I think at the last meeting in April, the city council has kind of adopted this philosophy that with this kind of a change that affects people's parcel reports and their properties, that the owners ought to be involved. So will the city be published the list and notify owners so that the owners will have the opportunity to provide their consent of what the city is planning to do with their homes? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a second comment.
Yes, next is Darlene.
Yes, regarding the parcel report, number 1 is on there today. That's good. Number 3, I think the wording recognize is a little bit ambiguous given the reconnaissance process we just went through. There's a difference between the people that were voted on the lists and wanted to be on the list, and the word recognize seems kind of ambiguous. So I hope that number 3 means you're listed or listing on the local inventory. The word recognize, I think, could be a lot bigger, and our understanding at the council meeting is that people that were not voted on the list were not going to get any designation on the parcel report. So that's my comment on number 3. Number 2, I think is related to your work plan goal number 1 and 2. I think the confusion for people that are property eligible is really what does it mean? And it just creates ambiguity. And if that can be addressed, if number 2, how is that different than number 1? How is that different than number 3 in terms of implications to your property? That would be helpful. Otherwise, it adds to the ambiguity on your parcel report. Number 5, I think, just a question is Palo Alto the only city that is going to be putting something on a parcel report that says may need evaluation? Because it's just going to raise questions from people that are home buyers, et cetera, in a transaction. So I think, you need to be kind of ready for that ambiguity that was said earlier, which is case by case basis. That is just adds ambiguity. And then the last thing is you mentioned that potentially eligible is no longer existing. I assume that means that applies to the criteria, any house over 45 years old and all that there's no longer another set of criteria and implications for potentially eligible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think let's move on to the staff report. I think that will actually address some of the questions expressed here. So let's do that, and then we can dive.
Of course. So as noted in discussion at the April 22nd City Council meeting, the council directed staff to explore some alternatives to the potentially eligible status that's located in our parcel report. So staff has explored those alternatives and has provided 4 options here for discussion. As noted in public comment, the majority of the comments were regarding the aligning the status with the California Built Environment Resource Directory, BIRD. So that is coming from the state, and those requirements are verbatim what was listed, and that is on the following slide here. So out of the 36 items that are listed for status codes that get pretty very specific towards an actual property and structure, they have 5 governing status codes, and those are what appear on the slide here. Those are verbatim from the status code list that's provided at the state level, and staff can walk through what each of those applications would look like for, say, our current inventory or structures within the city of Palo Alto. So anything that would fall under, say, that first status code, which is a property listed on the National Register or the California Register, would be applied to a property that either is listed individually on the National Register or the California Register, as well as properties that would be in the National Historic District that we have here in the city. As for status code 2, that would be a property determined eligible for listing on the National Register or the California Register. So that would result on a property that has either had a historical resource evaluation conducted, say in conjunction with a discretionary project that we discussed of that process on the review bulletin. That would also include, say, a Department of Resource and Rec, the DPR 523 form that we also conduct, say, if a property is, determined to be eligible. That's the form in order for listing at the California Register, or say, if it's not eligible, that same form would be conducted. As for number 3, excuse me, this is a property that's recognized as a historically significant by the local government. So as noted on the slide and in the staff report, this would follow the existing local category designation. So these would be applied to properties that are currently on the inventory, and staff does recognize that the recognized language is vague in the bird status code, but as noted, this is verbatim from there. So as the city of Palo Alto is investigating these alternatives, that language could be modified for more succinct, a status code applied. So that would follow any of the designations that we currently have for, say, a property that's a category 1, 2, or 3, or 4. As for status code number 4, that would be applied to properties that have had a historical resource evaluation or DPR form conducted, and they were determined to not be eligible for listing or designation. As for number 5, which I believe might be the hot topic item, that would be not evaluated for the National Register or California Register and may need evaluation. So this in many ways would replace the existing potentially eligible status, and it could be applied to any properties that meet the CEQA guidelines section 15064.5A. So that is a state requirement, and should a discretionary application be applied for, staff would need to comply with state law for that further investigation. And on that note, it's important to recognize that because a property is not listed as a historical resource, that does not denote that it isn't a resource. So further evaluation is required for that determination. So pursuant to CEQA. So that's a nice distinction to make here. Just because something is not listed doesn't necessarily mean that it is not a resource. So evaluation is needed in order for listing on the inventory. And if we go back to the previous slide, there is another option or alternative that the city could pursue, which would be removing the historic status altogether from the parcel reports. I believe there was a public comment that had referenced what other jurisdictions have. So I can't really speak for other jurisdictions if they have the equivalent, say, of a parcel report, but that is, within the city to provide that information or potentially not provide that information. So that would be an alternative that we could explore. There is a third alternative that could add, say, an asterisk to these reports, and that would, denote, say, further information would be required with planning staff for any structure that may be, say, 45 years of age, just highlighting and noting to the public or property owners that there is something that would be, a question, if you will. And the fourth option would be, well, not necessarily an alternative, but it would be remaining the potentially eligible status as is. So that definitely is an option on the table to keep the status quo, if you will. So with those 4 options provided for discussion, I can entertain any further questions or clarifications needed.
Okay, thank you. So I really like this new proposed language because it expresses that a property may need evaluation and that it's unevaluated but may trigger some things at the state level. And like, I do want to be really clear that, this is to comply with state law. And I think your description was really great in that regard, but that we do need to comply with CEQA. And so I think it makes it more clear than the potentially eligible designation, which I think we all recognize creates a lot of confusion about like what the specific nature of the issue is and what people would need to do. Along those lines, I think, while the option of not having this, thank you, removing the historic status altogether from the parcel reports, like I think that's actually less transparent than this proposed alternative because, with it removed, I can envision somebody purchasing a home, going in with some sort of development application and then having it trigger this sort of review and them saying, well, like the parcel report didn't say anything about it. This way, the parcel report continues to provide that information, which I think is, important and transparent for people looking at property. So I can, other comments too, but I kind of wanted to just mention.
I agree. My fear, if we remove it entirely, as has been suggested in the past, is that then the owner is going to be subject to these regulations at some point if they want to demo their property or make changes to it. It's going to have to go through CEQA evaluation if it's over 45 years old. So I'm not sure that removing any of the designations from the parcel report is actually helpful to owners. So I support this new language that is in line with the state for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to suggest for all properties that have a designation, obviously when in the parcel report, when it says historic status, it would state, National Register, California Register, local, it would, if it's been confirmed that it's qualifies as a historic, and I think that is already the case. But then I would just have a blanket statement on all projects that would say historic screening evaluation is required for all new development projects, because it essentially is. I mean, any project that is submitted to the city, a planner is going to go through and look at the parcel report and see the historic status. So it should just be a blanket statement for any project. It kind of levels the playing ground. It doesn't say you're potentially eligible. Everyone's potentially eligible. So everyone has to, like any application that goes through, someone has to look at the address and check that. So, and maybe it doesn't go beyond that, but I feel like a historic evaluation applies to every project. In fact, a lot of other cities, it does. Like in Menlo Park, if you apply for anything, you have to fill out a form, a historic evaluation form. Well, I mean, you're relying on your own resources to figure out if this is a historic property or not, but at least every project is required. I think Los Altos Hills does that and Hillsborough does that as well. They say you have to fill out this form and you have to say why, provide that information.
Yeah, I was wondering, it's not clear to me here which properties the intent is. I think we might want to flesh these out just a little bit more, but I think that it would be good to say when it says not eligible for listing or designation to actually articulate that they've already been evaluated and found not eligible instead of just not eligible. And then when we say not evaluated, are we talking about just putting an age on it? So when a property ages into 45 years, then it becomes not evaluated? I'm not sure which properties this would apply to, is what I'm saying. I hate that list, by the way, so don't tell me it's the list.
So to address your question, so planning staff would be investigating any discretionary projects pursuant to CEQA for structures 45 years of age. So as we, move through time, that date of, say, construction or a period of significance, if you will, of a structure does move up in conjunction with as we move through time. So that would be a rotating list that could be, updated through our parcel report system, as well as any of our mapping efforts as well.
And then the list that currently exists, it says potentially eligible, that list of 500, that would be gone.
So with these new status codes, it would be in a sense, addressing those potentially eligible properties, as well as cleaning up and providing more succinct language for all of the properties that are listed on, say, either the inventory or those that have been evaluated. So it would go beyond just the potentially eligible properties. So say if a property had sustained or conducted a historical resource evaluation and was determined to not be eligible for listing, that could be followed with the date that the evaluation was provided or conducted on. So that status code could be updated in our system.
Yeah, I think the clearer we can be about, I mean, I think 1, 2, 3 are perfectly understandable. But 4 and 5, I think the clearer we can be about what those mean. And I also think that bringing like the whole body of work that hasn't been evaluated and getting rid of that, the ones that were sort of vaguely looked at and identified would be helpful.
Aside from like properties that are already evaluated, it's the presence of a previous evaluation of some sort that determines what bucket it goes into. If it doesn't have an evaluation, then it's going to end up in category 4 or 5, pretty much depending upon the age of the structure and the nature of the development application. Yeah,
that would be correct.
So everything over 45 years old would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of them.
That potentially could be an alternative that we could explore. So in this instance, that would be, what's suggested by staff could be applied to properties. So, any property in Palo Alto would fall in one of these categories as presented.
So basically, either it has been evaluated and we know the status and we state the status on the parcel report. If it's not been evaluated, we should just say, instead of saying potentially eligible, we should just say requires evaluation. Is that what?
I think you're going back on your prior statement. I'm just going to jump in because, there might be a vacant lot that wouldn't require evaluation. Yeah, so not every project needs that. So it's really just those that are 45 years or older that haven't been evaluated fall into bucket 5.
But every year there's going to be a new batch of houses that are 45 years or older.
That's correct. We'd have to set up some system.
I see.
It's rolling.
Yeah. Algorithm. But I think just say, instead of say, in those projects that applies to, we could just say requires evaluation, and that kind of, I think what people are doing, I think how people are responding is in terms of their property value or in real estate transactions, they look at that and that's just a red flag because it's just a question mark. But would the words requires evaluation, would that be a question mark?
I think people do want certainty, but it's you can, if as a seller, you're super concerned about this, there is a route to obtaining certainty.
It isn't the key point that it's a state requirement.
Yes.
Well,
it just is.
Yeah.
So it should state that.
Well, and if I may, through the chair, so the distinction here is to be made, this would be applicable to discretionary projects. So ministerial projects such as building permits that the city processes would not be subject to this level of, say, review or requirements. Now, in the instance that a property would be listed on the inventory, you know, it would be potentially, depending on the category, subject to our municipal code and the requirements of either the review of this board or staff review. There are some, you know, further regulations that are applied locally to, say, development, say, ministerial, of what, you know, the city has required to be, say, in that captured. But this would be applying and subject for discretionary projects at the state level, which is already part of the state requirement for that.
So maybe we could do a supplemental explanation on the website that's, you know, sort of discussed item 5 more. I mean, not item 5, but you know, the category 5. And help, so people and real estate agents in particular, they could read a paragraph and have a better understanding of what it might mean.
And I'll just add, yeah, we can certainly have an exhaustive list of what's discretionary and what's ministerial. If you're, you know, planning to build a 1-story home, you know, that's going to be ministerial, not subject to CEQA. So that's something that is, you know, easy to say. And I think the community, including the realtors, already know that, because people do come in with 1-story homes to avoid any CEQA. So.
And I do, as far as this language for the parcel report specifically goes, though, I do think this language is an improvement over potentially eligible. I mean, which was causing significant confusion.
I agree. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. I think it's something that, as a property owner, if you go into the parcel report and see that your home is status 1 through 5, or the home you're looking to purchase is one of these statuses, you do your research like you would with any investment of that size. And like, to me, like, that's okay. I think that's reasonable.
Do we need to vote on this like language change?
It is not needed.
Okay.
You know, it was a direction of council that staff investigate these alternatives. So with the sake of conversation and for collaboration, staff wanted to prepare these for review of the board. There has been, to my understanding, a staff report that is going before council that has a discussion of these items. And our chief planning official can speak more towards that.
Okay.
Yes, the council on August 19th will be reviewing on consent the 5 additional properties. In that report, there had been some discussion about the fact that we're bringing this forward to the HRB for discussion, where we don't lay out in that report at this point the 5 or, you know, have any exhaustive discussion, because that meeting is not about this topic. You know, I think the council will know that the HRB has taken this up, and staff, and then it's a kind of a ministerial process to move forward with something. I mean, a consent.
It's on consent.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but with the board, it would certainly, you know, it's in the manner of a straw poll or, you know, consensus. Generally, we're hearing, so we can you know, feel confident to take this up with our director.
Okay.
I have a few petty comments here. So on number 4, I would like to see it referenced that it's been evaluated and not found eligible. I think that would clarify things. And also the last one, I'd like to see the comma be a semicolon because I think it's kind of hard to read the way it is now. Not evaluated. I don't know. It's a little weird for me. It's not really a sentence, so I don't know if it really matters. But I think maybe a separation between not evaluated and may need evaluation a little stronger than just a comma would make it easier for me to read.
Any additional comments or nope? Okay. Let's then move on to the approval of the Historic Resources Board meeting draft minutes from the June 13th meeting. I guess, do we have any public comment on that? I know last time we had public comment on the minutes, so.
Not for minutes, but during your further discussion on the parcel
Oh,
report.
do we need to reopen the parcel
Yeah,
report?
if you wanted.
Okay, we can, we can take pause and reopen the parcel report to public comment.
Okay, so Amy Sung raised her hand, and then Liana, I saw you raise your hand and put it back. Okay, so we have two. First, Amy.
Speakers have 3 minutes.
Amy?
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to provide feedback. I wanted to, could you put the slides back and numbers number 1 through 5? I wanted to ask what kind of certainty that we are replacing with this currently potentially eligible status, because the problem that we set out to address is to remove that uncertainty, and as being acknowledged by the board here, that it is very ambiguous and also uncertain. But here we are saying not evaluate and may need, and there is no criteria, there's no process clearly articulate what brings this property to this status, and if the city is considering that anything that is 45 years old, and I mean this is new to me. I have always heard 50 years is kind of like commonly thrown around, but this is the first time hearing about 45 years or older. If that is the case, I think that this should be removed from Historic Resource Board discussion, and then clearly on the planning department saying that, hey, you guys, everybody, that as long as your home is 45 or older, and that every year we will grow this list. And I think we need to get a sense of, do we know how many homes are currently that will be eligible that will meet this 45 years cut, and what kind of pool that we are looking into to sweep into this criteria. And is the city prepared to accommodate this kind of, in my mind, I interpret it as an expansion. Is the city prepared to spend its valuable, precious resource on this expanded review process? And again, what kind of a review, what kind of criteria? Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment.
Next is Liana.
Thank you. I'm Leanna Hunt. I've been a resident for over 55 years. Regarding the 5 items proposed, I don't believe that you are really responding to the conversation that took place at council earlier in the year, because if you're using a figure of 45 years plus, that includes probably 75% of the housing in Palo Alto. Huge number. I think that 45 years is absolutely an error. That should not be a figure used. That will entail tremendous amount of expense on the behalf of any citizens wanting to remodel or certainly do tear downs, build new. I think that you are really, you've not really narrowed this list as the council suggested. 4 and 5, very ambiguous. When you say may need evaluation, staff has total discretion then to order that any homeowner go through that process using the outside contractor for historic evaluation. That is very expensive process, and it would clearly delay many projects proposed for a construction. So I don't think you've really responded to the council. I think that clearly as realtors, we will need to discuss this further with individual city councilman members because they clearly asked for staff to come forward with a proper evaluation based on their discussion. And I don't think you've accomplished that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're going to close this out pretty soon, but I would like to just reiterate that this review relates to a state law. It relates to CEQA. So some of this review is required by state law, not local law. I don't know if staff would like to make any additional comments, but I do want to underscore that some of this review is triggered by CEQA.
Yeah, and Stephen, if you can also address the 45 years comment, because I don't believe that that was something that the city of Palo Alto chose. I believe that's a state mandate.
If I may, through the chair, so to address those questions. So as noted in the staff report, the public resource code section is 5024.1G. So that is where at the state level, the 45 years of age is coming up for the evaluation pursuant to CEQA. So as for some historical context, and perhaps our chief planning official can step in if I get things incorrect, but that potentially eligible status was applied to properties that were from that Dames and Moore survey that were, I believe the date or cutoff threshold, if you will, was 1948. So that is any of those current statuses that are on parcel report are a result of those previous efforts of the large comprehensive survey that was conducted at the city level. So as for, aligning what staff would already have to, be required as through state law, these would be discretionary projects pursuant to CEQA. This is just aligning our status codes and everything with the state. So what would already be required. So regardless if, we have a front facing status that reflects our already requirements from the state, or if there's no status removed, that is an alternative that we have explored per the direction from City Council.
Thank you. Anything
Yes,
additional?
so just adding, it's absolutely an option to remove potentially eligible from our parcel reports. It's absolutely possible to say, talk with planning staff as the only label for everything that's unknown. There's ways to say that.
But regardless of what it says, the project, depending upon the specifics of the projects and the property, is still subject to CEQA, regardless of what any website says.
That's correct. Any label that we place on our informative parcel reports, is just the first conversation that people have. It's not everything.
Yeah. Okay.
About a property.
So basically, we could remove the not evaluated status, and then unfortunately people would view their parcel report and it wouldn't say not evaluated, it wouldn't say anything. And then if they try to do a project and they're subject to CEQA, it's like, surprise, we have to evaluate the process.
That doesn't change the regulations. It just gives people less information.
Right. So so my point being, yes, it's confusing, but the option is either no information, surprise, you're subject to CEQA, or what we have listed here, potentially with some verbiage or punctuation edits.
I think it's fair to say would require evaluation upon application of, no.
Yeah, it's just not, not all projects require a preparation of a historic resource evaluation. If somebody's coming in and putting a second story on a home that may be historic, there's ways we can allow that without having to go through an exhaustive, expensive evaluation. certainly.
Well, I guess, sorry, I didn't mean would require evaluation. I'm basically saying would require screening to determine if it requires evaluation. Is there any wording that we could say require, or maybe I'm just getting off into the woods, but I had one more comment on the numbers 1 through 5. If we did adopt that, obviously 5 would have to include local Palo Alto. Item number 5, not evaluated for National Register California, we should also include or local, Palo Alto local register. Well, never mind. I mean, I was just saying if we adopt this from Beard, number 5 should also include our local.
I think we've typically been using National Register, California Register eligibility as like kind of the trigger for local inventory eligibility. Yeah, right.
The language conveys the CEQA aspect, the state law aspect, rather than, because it doesn't matter if it's been evaluated for local. If it is eligible for California, then it's, yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the minutes at this point. We kind of circled back there. So let's look at the approval of the HRB meeting draft minutes from June 13th. Is there public comment on this item?
No, I have no request to speak.
Okay. Does anybody have changes?
I got a couple of littles. So on page 35 of the packet, middle of the page, Amy, it says she responded by having a web page about the program was an excellent idea, but we require worldwide outreach. Are we talking about worldwide? Oh, yeah.
It may just be a transcription error. Can we just?
Anyway, if somebody would check
review
the
for
transcript, it just sounds a little, Palo Alto-y, because, we are the world. And also on the transcription, on page 38, when Ben, I can't say his name, shared about family owning a property in Coronado, the last line where it cost approximately $5,000 per year, I would imagine it saves about $5,000 a year. Can you check that one too?
Can you repeat who's speaking?
One of the public speakers, you're going to make me say this, Ben.
It's the third paragraph
Thank you.
on packet page 38.
Ben DeSico.
Thank you.
So if Ben said that, then that's what it reads.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 2 potential transcription items to check. Yeah. Okay.
Staff has noted those things.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. I move to approve the minutes from the June 13th meetings following review and any correction of those transcription issues.
I second that.
We mean voice vote or?
Oh, yeah, voice vote is
All
fine.
in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I was actually absent, so I abstained.
Oh, okay. Are there any additional announcements from staff?
No further announcements.
Okay. Before we finish up, I know this is board member Wimmer's last meeting on the board. So I'd like to thank her for her many years of service on the board. It's very much appreciated. We'll miss working with you. Thank you.
And I hope we can count on you to help us with preservation awards in the future.
Of course, I'm always here to help, but we have even a more important recognition to make today.
Yes. And we'd also recognize Amy French with her coming retirement. Thank you for all of your work with the HRB, for all of your years of service to Palo Alto. We're going to very much miss working with you and wish you a wonderful retirement and much happiness in your next chapter. So thank you for your service. And I don't know if any other board members would also like to, yeah.
We'll get to work on worldwide outreach in my retirement.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I'm really excited that Steven Schweitzer is here. He's amazing, and I think we have a bright future with him. Just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
These aren't really announcements, but things I think I'd like us to talk about. And some of this I kind of heard in my interview with the council. Definitely one was the Mills Act. But I think it would be good to connect more with the History Museum in ways we could do it, or have audio tours that were, kind of referenced our historic buildings, and put brochures, walking tour brochures in the new History Museum. Maybe I think most people will do it on their phones, but I think if we could incorporate, those little QR codes somewhere in the lobby and talk to them about how we could get the information out there, I think it's a good time to do it before they really get their interiors solidified. And I think we also need a new liaison to past heritage. Maybe we could just go into being our liaison and listening in on our meetings and connecting with the board. I know she is on the past board now. But otherwise, I think we need to look at having somebody else connect on a more intimate basis with the past board, because we are both working towards a lot of the similar goals.
Great. Thank you. All right. With that, I'd like to motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Great.